Pat, I'm alcoholic.
Pat.
Um, Merry Christmas, everyone. I texted Devin earlier. I was trying to get out of it. I'm not feeling too good. Um, but I'm, happy to be here today. Um, my sobriety date is March 1st, 2019. I haven't spoke like a long top Zoom meeting before, so this will be fun. And also, I just assume that if I hear silence because everyone's muted, that you're laughing with me. Uh, I guess. And I also assume everyone who doesn't have their camera on is naked, and that makes me feel better too. All right. So, anyways, I'm going to talk a little bit about what it was like, what happened, what it's like now, um, and we'll just see what happens here. So, from as long as I could remember, um, I've always like felt things very strongly. Um, Especially when I was in sixth grade, I'd been in 5 different schools, and that kind of just messed with my head a little bit because when I'd make friends and then I'd have to leave them or they'd leave me, and I kind of stopped trying to meet people. I kind of became a little in a shell. Um, it's asking me to admit people, Devin. I don't know why, but anyways, I guess I'm a host. Um, so like I said, I kind of started feeling things strongly. Um, I've always had like a voice in my head. I guess you could say I was like daydreaming, but it was never about pleasant things. It's about how everything's going to fall apart and how people don't like me. Um, so I moved around a bunch as a kid, and I kind of became quiet. Where I used to be more of a class clown and have a lot of fun with kids in my class and friends. And then I just what I would do is watch hours of TV to kind of isolate myself and get in my own little world. Um, I don't know. I felt like I couldn't get along with people, and I think a lot of people feel that way growing up, alcoholic or not. Um, but what happened for me is instead of learning like coping skills, like how to deal with feelings of being alone in a positive way, I kind of um, well, I took a different route, if you will. So I actually was against drugs and alcohol when I was young. In the fifth grade, I won a Dare award for Dare about like I wrote a paper why you shouldn't drink and use drugs and smoke cigarettes. And I felt strongly about it, and I spoke in front of the whole school, and they gave me a medal, which I still have to this day. Um, ironically, um, all I saw was the harm that drugs and alcohol caused. Um, the police officers showed you videos of DUI accidents, and you see things on pop culture and TV, and you hear horror stories of um, what happens to people while they're under the influence and what it does to families. And that's all I knew about. As I started getting a little bit older, I started seeing another side. And my first example was my sister. I have a sister who's about 2.5 years older than me. And she had the same experience as me as far as getting moved around a bunch. And it was tough for her as well. Um, she's non-alcoholic, by the way. But anyways, she was in high school and I was in middle school. And she started partying with people, going out, staying out late, um, and getting drunk and stuff. And I remember her coming home saying like, "Oh, you shouldn't do that. It's it's I've heard bad things." And I would just see this kind of twinkle in her eye, and she'd be like, "You don't get it. I'm having a great time." Um, and there was no denying that she was having a good time. I was the one who wasn't having a good time, and starting there, like my thoughts about alcohol started to change. I started to think maybe this could be something for me. Even though I don't really believe that it would be a good thing, I started to change my mind a little bit about alcohol and other drugs. I became more open-minded. I think the years of being isolated and sad and listening to this head that just is nonstop, I think that made me willing to change my ideas about drugs and alcohol, because I knew that there were bad things, but I think the pain that I had endured of growing up, just like everyone else does, started to change my mind about maybe if this wasn't so bad after all. Well, I was only seeing good things in person. So after watching that for a little bit, I don't know, by the 9th grade, I was 14, and that's when I took my first drink. And just like most people talk about in AA, I fell in love. It became, the goal was to only do it every weekend or something, or every other weekend. I don't remember what the goal was, but soon it became an everyday thing. I really liked I was very experimental. I tried all sorts of different drugs to make myself feel better. And I won't talk much about drugs. That's just, I did lots of them. But what I saw is that, like, if I took a substance, it could make me feel differently, and I'll try all of them and get all the feelings. Over the years went on, alcohol has always been my number one, and that's how it ended as well. So I made a lot of friends. I can kind of relate to Bill and his story, how he had arrived, he found alcohol, and I felt like I could be a part of. I felt like I could be with the people in school. My story isn't anything crazy. I think it's pretty normal. I'm just a kid who feels too much, and alcohol makes me feel less or feel better. It quiets my mind down. What alcohol did for me was incredible, and then it started doing things to me. It took a few years. My high school career of drinking was a blast. I made a lot of friends, and I had a good time. And so it was good. The worst thing that would happen was, like, my mom would find a bottle and a bong every once in a while, and I'd get grounded and just drink alone in my basement, and I didn't really have a problem with that. So no real problems just yet. The only sign was that I just really loved alcohol a lot. Anyways, a few days after I graduated high school, or a few weeks, I had just turned 18, and I got arrested for the first time. I have a tendency to steal things when I'm under the influence. It's a bad habit. But I got arrested for the first time for stealing beer out of garages, and so I could drink more. And they put me on this probation where if I completed it without any screw-ups, they would have cleared my record, and it wouldn't have been a big deal. Do my community service, pay some money. But after about a month or so of being on it, I got an underage citation from the same cop who had arrested me. Therefore, they took me off of that probation and put me on regular probation. It seemed that, like, after I had graduated from high school, something had switched where my drinking, I had less control of what happened once I started drinking. I went off to college not to learn anything. I had no intention of learning anything. I had big dreams about how I'd show people one day, but I wasn't willing to do any work. I simply am looking for the party. And I'll do whatever. Things weren't that bad yet, so things were fine. I was a kid. I was having fun. Of course, like I said, after I got arrested, consequences started coming in. I couldn't do certain drugs because they would last in your system for too long. So that's when I started drinking more. because you can, as long as you stop a little bit beforehand, you'll be fine. I was at college, and what started happening was that those nerves and that anxiety and fear became stronger, it seemed. The voice in my head that was calling me a piece of crap and telling me all these stories about the world, what I simply thought was the truth, it got louder. And so once I started drinking, I couldn't get drunk quick enough. So I drink really quickly. And then I'd lose control of the amount that I took, and I'd start doing dumb things because, anyone who drinks a bottle of vodka in a short amount of time will do something stupid. That's just human. That's just what happens. That's just what happens if you drink that much. The difference between someone like that and me is that I'll do it again the next day, even though I've caused a lot of destruction. I might tell myself I'm not doing that again. But then the next day, after I feel a little bit better, or let's say a day or 2 days later, it doesn't really matter. The progression began there, but I had to drink for a lot longer. But what would happen is I'd start making a fool out of myself. I started being asked not to come back to places, and no one really wanted to hang out with me.
Got muted.
I'm muted. That's funny. Who muted me? I decided to go back to the city I grew up in because I thought all my friends would be there and I'd be able to have a good time again to recapture the high school times. Again, nothing really serious now. It's just I was making a fool out of myself, and I didn't feel that good. I was depressed. I was sleeping a lot. Just a really loud mind, but as far as external consequences, nothing crazy. I'm a pretty standard garden variety alcoholic. My story my case might be more severe or a lot less severe than yours, but all I know is that over time things got worse. And so let's see. I came home and I was expecting people to really be happy that I was coming home, but no one really was. I was just living at home, working at a grocery store and trying to get as drunk as often as possible without getting in trouble. I was getting a drug test once a month, and I knew exactly the time and day that it was going to be for a month long, which would make it pretty easy to pass a drug test, but I couldn't seem to do it. After a little time had passed, after being arrested for the first time, I was unable to pass it. So my probation officer gave me an ultimatum. She said you could go to rehab or go to jail. And this was, I believe, in 2011 or 12. So I was about 19 years old, 19 or 20. And I chose to go to rehab because I didn't want to go to jail. I figured it would be more comfortable in rehab. And the fact was, I was unhappy. I hadn't been happy for a little while. I had some friends, this one friend in particular, we were all drinking together one night and he told me, Pat, the reason, now I'm paraphrasing here, something along the lines of, we aren't sure what to do with you. When you drink, you go too far, and when you're not drinking, you're really tough to be around. It's like walking on eggshells, that type of thing. And they always say, an alcoholic, not by the guy who's stumbling, but the guy who you have to walk on eggshells around. Because that guy soon will probably get drunk. I mean, that's my experience. If I'm restless, irritable, and discontent, which is kind of that feeling, that grindy feeling that I have, the fact I had found alcohol a few years before, and I know that there's a solution to that feeling. And that's my story, is that I get screwed up in the head, and then I got to get screwed up, even if I don't want to anymore. And that's what happened over the years. So I went to rehab. Like I said, I things weren't that bad on the outside just yet. I had some charges. But it wasn't anything huge, just facing some jail time. And I went to rehab instead, and it was interesting. I saw something there that definitely intrigued me. I saw people who were a lot like me. They thought like me, and they acted like me, and they talked like me. But they had been sober for a little bit, whether it be a couple weeks or a couple months. And then sometimes some people would come and talk, and they were a couple years, and I could relate to them. I had my best friend growing up asking me, like, why do you drink the way you do? And I said word for word, if you thought like me, you would drink like me. And then here were people who thought like me, but they weren't drinking and they were happy. And they told their stories, and I could relate. I could relate with the feelings mostly. The feelings of just hating yourself, for being embarrassed of the harm that you've caused people, for not wanting to act a certain way but doing it anyways. I could relate with that. I couldn't relate with some of the hopelessness and desperation that was still to come, but it definitely piqued my interest. I ended up going to another rehab after that, like a long-term, like a couple-month place in extended care, if you will. And after doing that, I ended up relapsing, if you want to call that, for about a week or two. During those rehab stint and going to meetings and stuff, I was introduced to AA, and like I said, it interested me. But I hadn't quite I wasn't convinced that alcohol wouldn't work for me, and I wasn't convinced that I needed to stop. I just wanted to make sure. So I tried it again, and I was miserable. So I decided to give this thing a shot, and I ended up staying sober for a little over 2 years, until 2015. During that time, I worked with a sponsor, and I started practicing some steps. I started to feel better. The biggest thing that happened for me during those years is that I built like a fellowship around me of young people. I joined a young people's committee, and I had some fun. But my experience was that wasn't enough. I was introduced to the steps in the book. I wanted to look good and sound good. I thought if I learned the material and could share it with you, that would somehow do something for me. And I'm not suggesting you not learn the material, but my experience is I got good at sounding good, but I wasn't living the principles that I needed to, I guess from my experience. And so a few things here, and I'm only speculating because I don't know what's true and what's not, but things started getting rough in sobriety, where I had some roommates move out. I developed some resentments. I got off some medication for depression that I'd been on for a while. And I moved into this place by myself. And things got tough, uncomfortable. And because I hadn't felt like I had hit a true bottom with drinking, I felt like I had a way out of AA. I think as long as as long as I think that I can drink and get the feeling that I'm looking for and keep the damages down to a minimum, that I'll always have a back door out of AA. And like I said, I hadn't felt completely hopeless. So it was kind of a no-brainer. I felt alone. I felt upset. I felt like I had been doing AA because I had been doing what I saw some people around me doing, which they said was AA. And I wasn't okay. And so I started drinking. And since I had been sober, I guess the progression of alcoholism had continued, which was interesting. They had talked about that in the meetings. I started blacking out more than I ever had before. And I blacked out for a few days straight, which was new for me, which was kind of scary. I realized that maybe I'd lost a little control. But by this time, like I said, I was kind of convinced that I was doing AA and AA didn't work. I built my case up against AA, and that you would have saw that before I took the drink, all these resentments towards different AA members, and myself, just mostly upset, depressed, anxious, the voice in my head very strong. So, like I said, my drinking kind of spiraled pretty quickly. I ended up getting arrested again. I blacked out and woke up in a jail cell. I had been stealing again, my favorite pastime, and I was a mess. It was like mid-morning, and I was in a blackout. It was light outside, and I was just going into people's cars and neighborhoods trying to just steal things. I didn't need the money. I didn't need anything. I don't know what I was doing, but I have a tendency to do that when I'm in a blackout for some reason. And that's not the last you'll hear of that, actually, in my story. So I woke up in a jail cell after a few months of drinking, and I had realized that I had made a mistake, that perhaps I should not have picked a drink back up again. Maybe I had bit off more than I could chew. There's an old saying in AA that I had heard. Well, at least I've heard it. It's a saying that I've heard, that the alcoholic drinking is like having sex with a gorilla. You're not done till the gorilla is done, right? So I kind of I had lost control. Let's see. I woke up in the jail cell, and that was the first time that I sincerely decided that I didn't want to drink again. The past few months of my drinking had proved that I can't drink like a normal person, and I needed some sort of help. I became a periodic binge drinker, meaning that I would get this built up restless irritability, discontentment, depression, anxiety, and I'd have to go on a bender because I was just so screwed up in my head. And then I'd hit the sauce real hard for a few days, a week at the most, and cause a lot of damage. And then I'd say I need to stop. I'd come crawling back to AA or rehabs and say I need help. And then I'd do that for a few weeks, and then I'd start feeling restless, irritable, and discontent again. And I'd feel so screwed up in my head that I need to take a drink. And then I'd take a drink, and then I'd drink for a few days or a week at the most, cause a lot of damage, and then come crawling back to AA and rehabs and probation officer saying I need help. And I did that for about 4 years. During that time, things got a lot worse for me. I became one of those guys that you see in and out of rehabs. When I got sober, I was 26, and I had been to 10 different rehabs. 2 or 3 of them were like a few months long. I had been to jail a bunch of times, in and out of different psych wards. I talked about this periodic drinking that I did Um, I would, there was one time I was sober for about 6 months. And like I said, I woke up in a jail cell and I picked up a bunch of charges and they put me on drug court, which you don't want to get on drug court. It's, you're not doing well. And so the fact was, if I did well in the program, then they would drop all the charges and I'd be okay. Kind of like that program I was on before, but this one was more serious because I was facing prison time because I had racked up a lot of charges while I had been blacked out. And so I knew that this was serious. And again, like I said, I had decided I never wanted to drink again. And I meant it with all my heart. And that was the first time that I really said to myself, I'm never going to drink again. And I mean it. And I'll do anything it takes. It was about 6 months later that the obsession returned. I was working as a waiter at a fine dining restaurant one night, and things weren't going my way. And what I mean by that is that I was restless, irritable, and discontent. I was miserable. You know, I had a place to live. I had friends. I had a family who supported me. I had money, you know, but apparently that's not enough for a guy like me. Nothing's enough. I'm just chronically not okay all the time. And I need to do things to make myself feel better. And what that begins as is I used to act out, go on like dating sites and try to find a woman to make me feel better. You know, yeah, it would start there, and then I'd get ashamed of what I was doing, and then I'd isolate a lot. I'd stop talking to people in AA. I would stop talking to a sponsor. And then, like I said, I was at work one day and the obsession had struck me. If you asked me 24 hours prior if I was going to drink again, I was still scared out of my mind of going to prison or anything like that, that I would have told you, no, I'm not going to. But something happens, you know, kind of like what I was talking about with drugs and alcohol when I was younger. I didn't want to use drugs and alcohol when I was a kid. I didn't want to turn out like those people I saw on TV. But when that's screwed up in your head for so long, and for me in this point was a few months, you start to change your mind about things. And so I started to change my mind about this whole no drinking nonsense. I decided that maybe it wouldn't be so bad if I just took a drink. I'm not going to get that drunk as long as I stay home and don't steal stuff. I'll be okay. And so what happened was I made it home from work that night. I always tell this story. I made it home from work that night without drinking because I knew if I started, I might have to take a breathalyzer and a drug test in the morning because I was on random. And I knew I might have to do that. So I was able to hold off. And I waited till 5:30 in the morning till I could make the phone call. I didn't sleep at all that night. And I knew if I picked up beer or liquor on the way home that I would start drinking it. So I waited till 5:30 in the morning. I made the phone call and they said, nope, you don't have to come in. So I ran off to the closest store that sold anything and I got a case of beer and I started chugging it. And again, like this was so probably like 5:45 that I start drinking. And by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I woke up in the back of an ambulance. I had overdosed on drugs and crashed my car while driving. And the plan was just to drink a little bit at home. What had happened was I started drinking beer, and I'm a liquor guy, really. Beer is not for me. I like to chug vodka. I need to get there as soon as possible. And so once the liquor store opened at like 11 a.m., because I'm from the East Coast, they don't have it. They don't sell it at like Fry's or anything. It's at the liquor store, and it was like a weekend. So anyways, the plan wasn't to do any drugs, but of course I changed my mind once I start drinking because I lose control once I start. So I'm back in jail and I'm facing some serious stuff. You know, like I said, I was feeling crappy, and then I decided to drink again. And then I wake up the next morning and say, how could I have decided to drink again? Which begs the question that did I really decide to drink again, or was the choice kind of made for me? And that's kind of a little bit that I've learned about myself and the alcoholic delusion. It seems like it's my idea, but if you wake up the next morning baffled about how you could have taken that drink because you know what happens to you every time you do it, how could I have done this again? I have years of experience showing me that one drink means that I'm screwed. How could this have happened? And sitting in a jail cell and racking my brain and afraid about the future, guilty about the past. Anyways, I made it out of jail after a month or so, and then they put me on house arrest and put me back in rehab. And I was very grateful for all that, and I'll never do it again. A few months later, I'm off again, and so I don't. This part of my life is kind of foggy. I don't remember a lot of it. Just in and out of jails and rehabs for a while. In 2018, I believe, they sent me off to Florida for some mental health help. I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, which caused me a world of misery. It's something besides alcoholism. It has nothing to do with alcoholism, but it's part of my story. And so they sent me off to. I was supposed to be getting help for mental health stuff, and I had actually just gone on a long bender, and they didn't know I needed detox as well. But anyways, long story short, I ended up in Florida and started doing a shuffle there. I missed my sister's wedding, which I was pretty upset about. The crazy part is I remember sitting in the detox bed, and I put this like ultimatum in my head that if I could choose between getting a drink right now and going to my sister's wedding, it was an easy choice for me. I wanted to drink. I just remember that specifically and feeling like a piece of crap for thinking that. I was missing my sister's wedding, which we had talked about since we were kids, and in my head, I would much rather would have had a drink at the moment. And then I felt bad about having that thought. I don't know why I shared that, but it just came to my mind. Anyways, I was in and out of rehabs in Florida for a little bit without the courts finding out. And before I knew it, of course, I'm in handcuffs again. I woke up handcuffed to a hospital bed. I had been stealing stuff again. If I ever get drunk again, you should probably lock your doors. Just saying. So, God, I wish I could hear people because this is horrible when I make a joke. Anyways, most of your screens are black. So, ended up back in jail. By this point, I'd become pretty hopeless. I could see the bigger picture. This wasn't just about I'll get my act together this time. I started to see that there was no end in sight. That this would continue on for, I don't know, forever, I guess. I would start drinking, and then I'd say I'm never going to do it again, and I meant it, and then I'd start going back to AA, and then I'd feel shitty again, excuse my language, and then I would find it necessary to drink again, and I'd cause all this harm, and then I promised I would never do it again. I started seeing the bigger picture. Thanks, Dan. Anyways, what happened was they sent me out to Arizona, and as a last-ditch effort, and I was pretty hopeless. They sent me to like this really nice rehab because they thought that would help me, but I don't need any more rehabs. There's only so much you can do there. I was convinced that I was going to die an alcoholic death. So as soon as they let me out to look for a job, I got drunk and ended up sleeping under a bridge in the middle of winter in Prescott, just chugging vodka. And I just wanted to be left alone. That was kind of my dream, to be left alone. Every time I drank, I felt like I would get in trouble. I just wanted to be left alone and drink, and I was able to do that. And anyways, that was just where my drinking brought me. I never thought that I would be at a place like that, shivering, trying to drink myself to death. Just coming from a kid who liked to smoke weed on weekends to a kid who's afraid of what other people thought of him, constantly thinking, that's where it brought me. I always had a bright outlook. I was always a nice kid. How could this have happened? I felt like I had lost complete control of my life. I was not in control anymore. What happened to me then was that I was back in a rehab trying to stay out of jail. And if you've ever been in this kind of merry-go-round, I got to the place where I wanted to die. And so, well, I had felt that way for a while, and I ended up at a psych ward. And something happened to me there that is kind of the reason that I'm sober today, I believe, is that I found some hope. I saw through one of the delusions that I had. I was convinced that I had given AA a shot back in 2014 or whenever it was. I had given AA a shot, but I hadn't done all that it requires. It says in How It Works, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. I was under the impression that I had been thoroughly following the path. I had been convinced that AA didn't work for me. Therefore, I blew off AA altogether. Said, you don't get it. It doesn't work for a guy like me. And I believed that with all my heart. And then when I was in that psych ward, I realized that I hadn't completely done this program, and maybe there was hope for me. I couldn't say that AA doesn't work. That wasn't an accurate, logical conclusion to come to because I hadn't actually tried it. And with that, I found some hope. I ended up going to a halfway house after that. And I started working the steps. I believe all that really happened to me was, seriously, all that happened was just a little bit of hope. That changed my life completely. That was what I was given. And from there, it's kind of crazy to think about, so much has happened, and I'm going to talk about it. I ended up at that halfway house, and I got a sponsor, and I started working the steps, like I said. I was familiar with the first 3 steps. I was familiar with 4 through 9, the inventory, the house cleaning. I was familiar with the maintenance, 10 through 12, if you will. I was familiar with the steps, and you know what? I could probably recite the book more than my sponsor at the time because I had been around AA. He's kind of like me, so maybe he could. It doesn't matter. The fact was, I only knew Alcoholics Anonymous in a nominal way. I didn't know how to practically apply it to my life. I knew what the book said, what the letters on the word, what the words said, and I could say them, but I didn't know how to make it a way of life. I started practicing the principles, not on purpose, it just kind of happened. The first thing that happened was I got honest. I knew that if I continued to be dishonest to the courts about my situation, then I would drink again, most likely. And if I drink again, I would definitely go away because they had given me countless, tries to get sober, and I kept slapping them in the face with it. And I realized that maybe if I got honest about stuff, something might happen. So I tried getting a different sponsor because I didn't like what my sponsor was telling me to do. I wanted to go faster through the steps. I wanted to make amends quicker. Like I said, I don't know. I was kind of hoping that I could just do a certain thing, take the inventory, do something, and then I could feel better already. But I think, like I was talking about in the beginning, is I've had a hard time growing up. And I think everyone has these feelings that I'm talking about, but I never took the time to build my character and to change my behaviors. Therefore, I always took the easier, softer way, which was doing something selfish to make myself feel better. In early sobriety, which I don't claim to have a whole lot of time sober here, but in very early sobriety, I believe a foundation was built by taking contrary actions. Rather than doing things to make myself feel better that my head thought of, I started asking people, what would you think I should do? I started praying to this God that I didn't really believe in, but I knew that if I got quiet, real quiet, and asked my conscience, my gut, what should I do in this situation? I would hear an answer, and I started to realize if I took that suggestion, I would be surprised. I would feel better. It was usually things that didn't make any damn sense at all, but if I did it, I would feel better. And I started trusting that a little bit more than the voice in my head. And the fact is, I didn't even trust it. It says in the book that no one likes to do these things. No one likes to take the inventory, get honest for the things that they've done, make amends. It says something along the lines of, we did it because we're all out of options. There was nothing left. I had tried everything else. I had tried half-assing AA, and I concluded that I was going to actually do this thing to the best of my ability. And the best thing that I did was that I just continued to reach out to people and ask for help and ask for direction. And I was able to start taking those contrary actions. And it didn't matter what I believed. It just mattered what I started doing. And that's my story still today. I stick to it. It doesn't really matter what I believe. It matters what am I doing? Even if it doesn't make sense, what am I doing? Am I still doing the right thing? We came to believe in the hopelessness and futility as life as we had been living it. I came to believe more so that this wasn't working. Therefore, I became willing to try Alcoholics Anonymous and have an experience because I'd never tried it. And so, like I said, I called my probation officer and told him what I did, and immediately regretted it because they told me you have to come to Pennsylvania to face sentencing. You're going to go away for a while. And my lawyer said, prepare yourself. During those next couple weeks, I was scared, of course. My lawyer said I was going to be going away for a while, and I got given the best advice that I ever have gotten in AA is, he said, rather than focus on the problem, why don't you focus on the solution? The problem's in the problem, and the solution's in the solution. The longer you focus on the problem, the more you're thinking about the problem. Focus on the solution, and the problem might just disappear. And that might sound crazy. It does sound crazy, actually. But it's like one of those things, it's like, it's so crazy, it just might work, right? That's AA for me. It doesn't make any sense when you first look at it, but then it makes total sense after you do it. Oh, of course it worked. So what I mean by that is focusing on the solution is rather than thinking about myself and thinking about what's happening to me here, thinking about how I can be useful to others. He said, why don't you just do AA to the best of your ability for the next 24 hours, call me tomorrow and tell me how you feel. It's not about the fact that you might be going away for a while. Right here, right now, what are you doing? I'm talking to you. That's what I'm doing. Well, why don't you go talk to someone else and try to help them? Something along those lines. I don't remember the exact conversation, but I got busy focusing my attention to other people doing these steps, and I started to have this experience. And what I want to say about this situation is, on my way to the airport a few weeks after telling the probation officer, I found myself crying tears of gratitude. At this point, I'm working a minimum wage job. I have no car, no money, nothing, no girlfriend. But I was happier than I'd ever been. I had found freedom from me, freedom from that voice in my head that I was telling you guys about at the beginning of the talk. And I felt free, and I knew I was going away, but I knew I would be free. I knew that it was temporary, that there was another side of it. There was a way out. Before, when I was sitting in my room trying to drink myself to death or under the bridge, there was no way out. When I was going in and out of rehabs for years, there was no way out. And now there was a way out. I had found the way out. And so I went back to Pennsylvania, and I gave myself up to the judge with a whole dramatic speech. And people in AA and some doctors and therapists and all that had sent me some stuff saying, like, this guy's had a change, And, you know, the judge believed it. And because, I mean, things had happened, he saw something had happened. And so they sent me back here. And, you know, that was, I don't know, a year and a half ago, maybe. And life hasn't been perfect since then, but it continues to grow by leaps and bounds. I want to talk a little bit about what it's been like today, what's been happening in my life, how I try to practice these principles. You know, just because I told on myself and made this whole dramatic, you know, thing, I still have alcoholism. And what that means is I still have that voice in my head that tries to dictate and litigate and tell me what is really going on in the world and how everyone else is wrong. And what I need to do is, you know, it talks about in the 10th step that we have a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. So what that means for me, a reprieve is a postponement of punishment. That's what it tells me in the dictionary. It means that I'm going to drink again unless I do some specific things. And I'm not saying that to you, I'm saying that for me, because that's my experience that I've sworn off time and time again and continue to drink anyways. But I found that on a daily basis, if I focus on the solution rather than the problem, something happens. I don't find it necessary to drink anymore. I haven't found it necessary to drink since March 1st of 2019, because I became willing to try these things. So what that means is I've gotten into action. I sponsor guys. I'm involved in the treatment facilities committee, and I bring meetings into rehabs when there's not a worldwide pandemic going on, especially when it's really bad. You know, I have a home group, and I stay plugged in. This past year has been crazy. It's been a very interesting thing for me. You know, this year has probably been it's been the best year of my life, even though it's been absolutely insane. You know, I got a new job. I fell in love, found out we're pregnant. There's a baby coming. You know, I got a good job. I have a little money in the bank, and guess what? I still have alcoholism. You know, just like it never worked for me before to get the outside the way that I want it to look. It doesn't matter. It's never good enough. It doesn't matter how I arrange the outside. For me, it's how the question is, how's it going, Pat? It doesn't matter what it looks like from the outside. The question is, how's it going? And if I'm feeling restless, irritable, and discontent, if I'm treating people poorly, and if I'm acting cold towards people and being short, there's a problem. And it might not be a problem for other people, but it's a problem for me, because for me, my feelings tend to snowball, and it gets worse, and they build off of each other. And before you know it, I find it necessary to get drunk. So I try to stay close. You know, I heard a speaker once say that, and this is the best advice that I can give to anyone, is to stay close. I think that we're supposed to experience things. This is my experience. I'm supposed to experience things in AA. I'm supposed to make mistakes. I'm supposed to do the wrong thing and learn from it and be part of this next classroom, if you will. I make mistakes, I learn from them, and I grow. The goal is to stay close, though. If I'm sponsoring guys and I have a sponsor and I'm going to meetings, I can get off track. You're supposed to get off track. That's part of this thing. That's how you learn. That's how you grow up. But at least I can stay. He calls it bowling with bumpers. If I'm still showing up and doing these things, I'm not going to get too far off track and fall in the gutter and get drunk. You know, if I continue showing up and doing the basic things, then I'll be all right. So it looks like I'm about out of time here. I want to thank Devin for asking me. I want to thank everyone for listening, and have yourself a Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Pat. Pat R is going to read Vision for You.